English translation, 427th contact, Sunday 9th of July, 2006, 13:18 hours.
Salome, there you are already, my friend.
Be greeted, Eduard. Yes, I am here early, but I have to leave in between and will not be back until later in the evening. So let us work until the time I am called. I also have a prediction to make for you about an upcoming event, which our research only revealed this morning.
You might as well say so, then it will not be forgotten.
If that is your wish, then please, on the coming 17th of July, a severe seaquake of magnitude 7.9 will again occur in the Indian Ocean and trigger a tsunami that will roll up to almost 3 meters high on the coast of Java, in the Pangandaran area, and cause a lot of damage. This tsunami will also cause great destruction, and according to our first investigations, the number of human lives to be mourned will be around 800. Tourists from Europe will also be among them, because mass tourism continues to flourish in those areas and is not prohibited. At least the greatest number of deaths could be avoided if the government and other responsible persons would warn the humans living in the endangered area or otherwise staying there about the tidal wave, which they will not do, although they are officially warned. But the seaquake mentioned above will not be the end of the horror, for there will still be a great number of aftershocks, just as there will then also be a new quake of magnitude 6.3, which will not be connected with the aftershocks.
I could give a warning by phone, fax, or email.
That would be senseless because, if the responsible ones do not react to the official warning which they will receive, your efforts would also be senseless. Besides, you would only be ridiculed, as is usual on the earth with all governments and other responsible ones, which already proved itself, has always been repeated, since that time in the 50s, and also in the 70s and so forth, of the last century, when you sent your warning texts to thousands of responsible ones of the governments, newspapers, radio stations, and universities, and so forth. Your efforts would really be senseless. Therefore, in the future, you should abstain from such things because they bring no good fruit. The earth humans would rather hear false prophets and sect gurus, and thereby would rather make allowances for damage, woe, pain, destruction, and sorrow, than hear the wise words of a true proclaimer of the truth.
Unfortunately, you are right. Still, that is really not so easy to alter. This is also seen in regard to the war in Lebanon by Hezbollah and the Israelis. In the meantime, that a multinational troop fighting for peace according to Hinnock's model will finally find some legs through which real peace could be created on the earth, likewise still remains a great dream. Humanity must finally become intelligent and therefore allow understanding and rationality to prevail in order to dismiss the false governments and bring such humans to the pinnacle who work for true peace and for the people. It is namely not done with the idiotic conferences of state powers who lead a great snout in regard to peace and the fighting of terrorism and for the well-being of humanity. Because fundamentally it is these themselves who plot terror, death, destruction, and ruin on the earth and spread it worldwide. The powerful only exercise their power, live for their desires and crazy ideas, on which they satisfy themselves. And indeed it is all the same whether thereby millions of humans lose their worldly possessions, or even their lives. The great mass of all peoples is unfortunately, however, lowly intelligent and of only meager intelligence because they would rather pray religiously, full of devotion, fanatically, and full of expectation to their imaginary gods, who can bring them no help, because these do not even exist. The great mass of humans of the earth will simply not comprehend that there is no God the Father, no heavenly gods, no angels and no saints who determine and decide over the well-being and sorrows, as well as over the being and not being of the individual and the entire humanity. It will not be grasped that it is the human himself as an individual and as the entire humanity who determines and brings about their fate in every iota, and that subsequently only he or she, entirely alone, can and must bring themselves every necessary help. That is so because the human himself or herself, and quite alone, without some such godhead, angel and saint, and so forth, creates their thoughts and feelings in themselves, and from that carries out their behavior. Subsequently, they themselves are responsible in every regard for each and everything in every relationship. And therefore, also, they themselves determine their fate, and indeed in regard to the individual humans, as well as to the entire humanity. Were the earth humans finally to break loose from their religious and sectarian delusional belief, and turn themselves towards the named truth of self-responsibility for all things, then they would proportionally quickly turn to the better. The tyrannical and irresponsible state powers would be bumped from their thrones and replaced by powers which would work only for the well-being of the humans and therewith also for peace. And indeed according to the will of all those humans and peoples who demand peace and are willing to build up their intelligence in order to let rationality and understanding prevail all around. Unfortunately it is, however, presently still so that, with the great mass of humans of the earth, the intelligence is still stuck in children's shoes, and indeed this includes all who function as state powers and bring harm, death, ruin, destruction, war, and terror over humanity. But they all think, the peoples, as also the state powers and their vassals, that their intelligence is greatly developed and that they do not have more to learn regarding this. Subsequently, they would do the correct thing in accord with understanding and rationality, which, however, does not in the least correspond to the truth, because truthfully, they are abyss deep without intelligence, and thereby, thus without valuable rationality, and without effective understanding. Unfortunately, only a few humans with real evolutional, valuable intelligence, respectively, with pronounced understanding and corresponding rationality, let themselves be found on the earth. Yet they are those who make the effort, in order that the humans of the earth, progressing in consciousness, learn what love, peace, wisdom, freedom, and harmony is. And since unfortunately in this regard there are only a few, it will still long continue, before everything evil alters and a transformation comes about for the better. Yet every individual of all these few humans must daily make the effort to live as a model for all others, because only through that example of the correct manner of life, according to the creational measure of the laws, as well as through the necessary discussions, thoughts, feelings and behavior, and through the written words of instruction, is it possible that the humans of the earth build up their intelligence respectively, their understanding, and their rationality. Only through the ceaseless instruction in regard to the truth, through the few truly knowing and intelligent ones, could an alteration to the better come to pass. And indeed, also then, if only one iota of truth remains hanging in the world of thought of the still unintelligent ones, if, namely, the iota and iota line up together, then something forms from out of it, which constantly becomes bigger and more extensive, and subsequently also spreads itself, becomes more powerful, and ultimately forms a factor which cannot be overlooked, which can no more be left out of attention.
Actually, that is so. Still, as long as the peoples of the earth do not themselves become powerful in real intelligence, they will vote for bloodthirsty and might-greedy governments, pay homage to them, and themselves be of the same criminal attitude as these. Unfortunately, the few rational ones can accomplish nothing against the mass of irrational ones, and those who are slaves to the might-greedy ones, because they are still too few. Intelligence, namely therefore rationality and understanding, must first be diligently worked up by the great mass of all the peoples, and first then it will be possible that then finally rational behavior will occur and the might-greedy will be brought to reason. Until then, however, very much time passes. That also means that a multinational peacekeeping troop still has to wait a very long time.
Yes, that will unfortunately be so. Also, no authoritative person will notify me to whom I can explain the significance, the construction and the function, as well as the ins and outs of a multinational troop which fights for peace.
That will indeed be so. Naturally, you can ask one more question.
The question relates to water. Just like rocks, but also crystals, metals, ores, sand, etc. It has a dynamic consciousness, which is an energetic consciousness. In addition to the conscious consciousness of the human being, the instinct consciousness of animals and other creatures, and the impulse consciousness of the plant world. All these forms are forms of life. Each have a form of memory in a creational sense. The question now is whether the water, or another liquid, if any substances or molecules are supplied to it, stored in them in such a wise that they continue to exist signal-wise in the water, or in any liquid, even if no molecule of the substance supplied can be detected. This signal memory effect is attributed to homeopathic remedies. We have already talked about this on several occasions, but there was a television program in which various things were discussed, including the fact that it has not yet been possible to prove that such a signaling or memory effect of water exists in relation to homeopathic remedies. In addition, I think that such a memory effect is illusory, and that when illnesses are healed, imagination plays the decisive role, as you once explained. But then there is the question of whether other factors relating to the memory of water and other liquids need to be taken into account.
That is indeed the case. Water has a form of memory just like all other creational life forms. However, the form of memory, like consciousness, is dynamic and therefore energetic and therefore in no wise of the gross material. In this form, it does not register any material substances or molecules, but only energetic swinging waves, which, however, only last for a very short time, only to dissolve again independently. If homeopathic substances are introduced into water or other liquids in this manner, they only last for a short time, or only until the dilution is so great that no molecules can be detected at all, whereby the corresponding memory stores are then dissolved in the water. If this were not the case, the purity of the water would be impaired, because it would be full of signals of all possible swinging waves, etc., making it undrinkable and diseased. In fact, the water continuously purifies itself in a short time, and thus maintains its purity and naturalness, and thus its usefulness for all living beings who depend on it. If this were not the case, then all life that depends on water, whose self-purification process is stimulated and carried out by the Earth's magnetism, would fall ill. If the water memory were to store the signals of all sorts of things, as well as those of homeopathic substances, then the result would be an overload in the water, making it brackish, diseased, and undrinkable. Water can only remain healthy and usable if it does not contain any foreign substances, which would put a strain on the water memory in terms of signals. It is possible, however, to supply various types of substances for all kinds of purposes, although it must be borne in mind that these substances become impoverished and ineffective over time, so that the water returns to its natural neutral state, whereby the memory storage of the water in relation to the substances supplied is then also extinguished again. Water reacts to all sorts of swinging waves, which are very diverse, including all swinging waves of humans, animals, and creatures, whereby, for example, a healing of an illness can be the result when a person cultivates healing thoughts, when he drinks homeopathic water in which no molecules of a homeopathic substance are present. Likewise, this applies when humans have given any animals, etc. water with homeopathic substances that have become ineffective. That is, water in which there are no more molecules of a homeopathic substance. The trigger of the healing process then leads back to the human being, who unconsciously and telepathically directs his or her healing thoughts to the corresponding animal, which catches it and triggers a self-healing process according to its instinctive consciousness, just as it is the case with humans, where a self-healing process also takes place, no matter whether he or she uses the water consciously or unconsciously, or if he or she consciously takes the water as a remedy, or if it is given to them unconsciously by a third person who unconsciously telepathically transmits corresponding healing thoughts to the person taking the water.
So if I use any radio or radio frequency to explain the whole thing, I understand that it is inherently neutral, but is immediately loaded if any radio or radio impulses are introduced into that frequency. If the transmission is stopped in relation to the impulses, however, then the neutral original state automatically reappears, whereby the signals received disappear or dissolve again. If, however, impulses from different transmitters are directed to the same frequency at the same time, then there is interference, a rattle, noise, and an inextricable chaos. Overloading the frequency by different transmitters at the same time makes it unusable. This is the same as it would happen with the water memory, if it could store the signals of any substance for a long time, because then a collapse would occur, or the water would be destroyed in its purity and naturalness.
The comparison can very well serve as an explanation. It should be noted, however, that the frequencies do not have their own form of memory, such as water, all liquids, and living materials and life forms of all kinds. The water memory form is only designed to store dynamic and thus electromagnetic impulses, which are aimed at preserving the nature and purity of water. As a liquid, water is, of course, also conductive for electricity, and therefore electromagnetic swinging waves and sound waves, etc. So, for example, the high-frequency oscillations and sound waves of the water creatures, such as the whales, can be transmitted over hundreds and even thousands of kilometers, whereby these oscillations and sound waves ebb and flow again and dissolve, just like material substances when they dilute in such a wise that no molecule is present anymore. If this were not so, then so many swinging waves would accumulate in the waters, in rivers, lakes and seas in their memory that a hopeless chaos would arise and the water life forms would no longer communicate with each other and among themselves and could no longer find each other. And consequently they would die out, or would have died out before they could actually come to life. So it is necessary that also with regard to swinging waves and signals in relation to all things, thus also with regard to homeopathic remedies, the law of becoming and passing applies, and consequently only self-supporting values can be stored in the water memory, or in other liquids, or signals that are aimed at keeping oneself or the water, or any other liquid, natural and pure. But now, Eduard, dear friend, we should turn to our work. I still have 3 hours left.
We will make good progress on that.
We will work through the rest tomorrow. It will be in the afternoon when I get back.
Okay, then we want